Hello everyone, this is International Master Robert Jamieson from Kids Unlimited in Melbourne, Australia. And today I thought we'd have a chat about how to improve. I get a lot of questions on Reddit and everyone says, oh, how can I become a master? Or how can I get to 2000 by the end of the year? What do I need to do to improve? So this is clearly a big topic for most chess players. Now, in my previous video, I talked a bit about what sort of things you have to do and what environment you have to be in to become a stronger player. So I've always thought that the best way to improve is to go through your games, particularly your losses, with a coach who can explain to you the areas where you need to improve and what you're doing wrong. If you can't get coaching, maybe you've got a stronger friend who can help you and go through your games, or you can check your games on an engine. The engine can only tell you the best move, not perhaps the reason for it or what you're missing overall. Okay, so let's talk about different aspects of chess. So to improve, you need to really understand what areas you need to work on. What are you falling down in at the moment? In chess, basically, tactics rule. If you're no good at tactics, you're not going to be much of a player. So you need to be able to identify tactics when they occur in your game. And you generally do that through pattern recognition. So you should regularly do puzzles so that your brain builds up a database of tactics and combinations, so that when a similar position appears in your game, your brain goes, aha, let's have a look at bishop takes h7 check, because I can remember that from before. So certainly you need to work on your tactics. Maybe you're losing your games because you are blundering. Just about everyone's games at a lower level are decided by blunders, big or small. So you need a system to avoid mistakes. That system is usually asking yourself a series of questions. So for instance, your opponent makes a move. You should immediately say, what is he threatening? Then the next question should be, what am I threatening? Because if he's threatening a pawn and you're threatening a queen, obviously it's more important to understand that you're threatening his queen. Next question, can I ignore his threat? It might be a threat, but there might be something more important you can do. Then you decide upon your move and you're about to make it. But very important, you must check the move before you make it to see that there's not something you've missed. How many times have you made a move and as soon as your hand lets go of the piece, you go, oh my God, I've blundered my queen, or I've fallen for back rank checkmate. I can remember one Russian master who came to Melbourne, and he was a very careful player. So when he was about to move, his hand would hover over his piece and he'd have a bit of a look around. And if he was happy, then he'd touch the piece, move it to the square he intended, have another bit of a look around. And if he was finally happy, he'd let go of the piece. So you have to be careful about your moves. All right. Why do you blunder? Maybe you're blundering because you're in time trouble. Your time management needs a bit of work, particularly in short time controls, rapid games, 10, 15 minutes, something like that. My philosophy was always to play a good move quickly. I couldn't see the point of spending 5 minutes finding a great move and then having sort of 20 seconds left for the rest of the game or something. So try and find a good move quickly and ideally stay a little bit ahead of your opponent on the clock. So if you do get into a time scramble, he's the one under pressure for losing on time and you aren't. That was always a good strategy. All right, let's talk about different aspects of chess. Openings. Right, you shouldn't spend too much time studying openings. The vast majority of chess books are on openings and people think about opening traps and stuff like that. Whereas really, if you want to become a strong player, the opening doesn't matter too much. So really, the aim of the opening, from my point of view, is that you want to try and get into an opening that you understand better than your opponent. All right, so how do we do that? I always stuck to the same openings. So, you know, I play Alapin Sicilian or Exchange Lopez, something like that. I played that all the time. So I knew that opening really well. And I knew the ideas that flowed from that opening. So have a think about what you're going to play. Try and study it and make certain you understand it. And you can play it quickly. You don't have to think. You know what variations you're going to play. So you're trying to get an opening you understand better than your opponent. All right. One aspect of chess that I find many players don't understand is pawn play. All right, what is pawn play? Let me give you an example here. So let's say we're playing a game as black and our opponent starts d4, we play d5, and he plays knight c3. I can immediately say, okay, I don't think my opponent's that strong. I don't think he understands pawn play. Why? Because he has blocked his c-pawn. I mean, normal openings like Queen's Gambit, King's Gambit, Sicilian, whatever, you are trying to get two pawns side by side so that either they can support each other moving forwards, or they can swap off to open lines for your other pieces, or they're controlling all the squares in front of the pawns. Pawn play is great. But say he's played knight c3, all right, I'm going to play knight here, and maybe he puts a knight out, and I put a bishop out, and he puts a bishop out, and I put a pawn up, and he goes here. So basically, I'm controlling the e4 square. So he can't get two pawns side by side, e4 and d4, and he's blocked his c-pawn. Whereas when I'm ready, I can play c5. I've got my two pawns side by side, and I'm the one with the pawn play. Okay, let's have a look at a more detailed example. So for instance, this is a position from an English opening. I like this setup as black. So your brain should be thinking, moving into the middle game in particular, about pawn play. What are you going to do? So for instance, white here, his pawn play would be b4. He's got his two pawns side by side. He can't play d4. So he's got one option for pawn play. The reason I like this for black is because he's got three options. Black can play b5, black can play d5, black can play f5. Okay. All right, so make certain you understand pawn play. Middle games. My most common complaint from students probably is they get out of the opening and they say, I don't know what to do. All right, so what do you do in the early middle game? How do you get a plan? Well, you should probably work out where you are going to play. Are you playing on the king side, the center, or the queen side? How do you decide? Generally, it's where your pawn chain is pointing. So for instance, let's say we had a French defense. Something like this. All right. So clearly white's pawn chain is pointing towards the king side. He has more space on the king side. So he should be thinking, I'm playing, attacking, whatever, building up on the king side. Whereas black, his pawn chain's pointing towards the queen side. He's got two mobile pawns on the queen side. He should be playing on the queen side. All right. Your middle game plans, they don't have to be earth-shatteringly deep or anything. It's more just a question, not thinking necessarily of attacking, but improving your position. So you might just want to play h3 or a3 to slightly improve your pawn structure or stop you getting back-rank mated. And of course, you're always looking for opportunities to do something to your opponent's position, you know, to give him double pawns, to give him an isolated pawn that could be weak by itself. So you're trying to improve your position, give yourself a good position, put your pieces on good squares, and give your opponent a bad position. It is pretty simple philosophy, middle game play. Okay. Yeah, I find the biggest flaw of people is they think chess is about threatening and attacking, whereas masters build up their position, then perhaps they get on to attacking. All right, what about endgames? Do you know your endgame theory? Do you know which positions are drawn and how to draw them? If you get a bishop and a knight against a king, can you checkmate? So you need to know your theory. And endgames are pretty important to study, particularly rook endgames, because I reckon about 10% of all games end in rook endgames. And I couldn't keep count of how many times I've had sort of like an even endgame or even slightly inferior endgame, but I can still outplay my opponent and either get a draw from a lost position or a win from a drawn position. So you pick up all those extra half points. I'll give you an endgame test in a minute. Some other aspects you need to think about to improve your results is your, how can I put it, sort of like philosophy of play. Are you a competitive person who's not scared? You know, I find that if a player, say, he gets to 2,000, he's really happy. His rating's 2,000. And he thinks that's great. That's an achievement. And should he play in this tournament at this slightly weak club? There's not many strong players. If he plays all these underrated juniors, his rating might go down. So he doesn't play. So the minute you think like that, you're defending your fantastic rating, you stop improving. You have to be brave and want to go out there and conquer the world, and you're after long-term games. Improve your understanding of chess, not just to win one game and not get your rating to go down. I always had a philosophy with draws, for instance, that I very rarely offered a draw. I would want to play on because I was fairly confident I could outplay my opponent. And if I didn't, and if he outplayed me, well, so be it. He played better than me. He deserves to win. But I wasn't agreeing to a draw just because it was an even position. So many of my students, they finish their game and they come up to me and we go through it and they say, here, I agree to a draw. And I say, why? They say, oh, I couldn't see how to win. It's even. And I say, so what? Why do you have to see how to win? You just played. You know, you might be an endgame, in an even endgame. Play. There's still plenty of opportunities for you to outplay your opponent. So you can't be a scaredy cat if you want to improve your rating and become a strong player. All right, let's get back to our little endgame puzzle. I'll move into the previous diagram. Here we go. All right, so little test for you. How's your level of understanding? Because I think chess is all about understanding. If you get a high level of understanding, you can become a strong player. All right, simple rook and pawn endgame. It is black to play. Have a think for 10 or 20 seconds. What is your move? What would you play? Okay. Most of my students, particularly the younger ones and the weaker ones, say, well, this is obvious. The best move for black is going to be rook check, because look, I've won a pawn and I've got two outside pass pawns. This is fantastic. However, it's not fantastic. They have failed the exercise. So if you went rook check so you could win a pawn, bad luck. Right, what's the problem with it? The problem with it is you have given me counterplay. And look at your pawn. You've got two outside pass pawns, but can they move? So it goes here, I take it. If this one goes here, then the B pawn's undefended. I take it. Meanwhile, I have a pass pawn. So like say you want to bring your king over, I'm coming king here. Now, if you don't do anything exciting, I'm going to play rook check and chase you away and start pushing my pawn. You can start checking me, but then I'm threatening to gobble your pawns. What do you do? So basically, you have given white play. You might even lose. All right. The most important thing in rook endgames is activity, particularly active rook. I tell my students there's three things to remember in rook endgames: active rook, active rook, active rook. The ideal position is where you have an active rook and you have your opponent tied down to defense, and you can improve your position and he can't improve his. So in this position, the best move for black is king e6. And what happened? White goes rook b3 to stop the rook check winning his a pawn. Then you go king up here. You're attacking his d pawn. So he has to play rook d3. So his rook is tied down to defending the pawn. His king is tied down to defending the pawn. And you should realize this. Hey, he's practically in Zugzwang. And just play here. He can make a move or something. I just play here. And now he's got nothing much to do. I think in the game white played here, black took the pawn, and black has an easy win. So black understood what was happening in the position and the importance of building up a good position, getting active king, active rook, as opposed to just gobbling a free pawn. All right. So I hope you got the right answer. If you did, you're on your way to become a strong player. If not, perhaps you need to work on your endgames. Right, I hope you found that advice useful, and I'll see you all in the next video.